She was declared homeless at her own father's grave. The rain pounded down. Thunder cracked across the Nairobi sky. Mourners were already turning away, umbrellas closing, car doors slamming. And right there, between the fresh dirt and the fading crowd, 22-year-old Brenda Roddick heard 5 words that would destroy her entire world. Your father is gone. And so is your place in this family. Security stepped forward. Her bag was ripped from her trembling hands. The gates of her own home, slammed shut in her face. That night, she would sleep on a bus terminal bench, hungry, alone, and completely erased from the only life she'd ever known. But what nobody knew, not her evil stepmother, not the lawyers, not the world watching her fall, was that the simple necklace clutched in Brenda's palm held the key to a $3 billion empire. And the most brilliant revenge story you've ever heard. This is the true story of how a billionaire's daughter went from having everything to absolutely nothing, to reclaiming her throne in the most shocking way possible. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand how far Brenda fell, you need to understand what she lost. Stephen Roddick wasn't just wealthy. He was a legend. Starting with a single trucking route across East Africa, he built the Roddick Logistics Empire, a network of shipping terminals, warehouses, and transport companies that stretched across 5 countries. By the time Brenda was born, the Roddick name meant power, influence, and untouchable wealth. But inside their Karen estate mansion, one of Nairobi's most exclusive neighborhoods, Stephen was something else entirely. He was a tired, quiet man who loved his daughter more than his empire. Brenda was only 10 when her mother died. The house that had once been filled with laughter went silent overnight. Stephen tried to be both parents, but grief had hollowed him out. Business trips became longer. Conversations became shorter. And that's when Namsa entered their lives. Elegant, composed, always perfectly dressed with a smile that impressed everyone who mattered. To the world, Namsa was a blessing, a graceful woman who could help Stephen move on. To Brenda, she was an unanswered question. First Namsa tried, or at least she pretended to. She praised Brenda in front of guests. She bought her expensive dresses. She asked about school, but never deeply enough to invite real connection. There was always distance. Always calculation. Then came Kelvin, Namsa's son from a previous relationship. Already in his late teens when he moved in. Entitled, arrogant, sharp-tongued. This place is wasted on kids, he once said, looking around the mansion like it bored him. It should belong to people who know how to enjoy it. Brenda had been sitting quietly with a book. She didn't respond. From that moment on, something shifted. Namsa stopped correcting Kelvin when he mocked Brenda. Family photos never included her unless Stephen insisted. Meals became colder. Invitations disappeared. And Stephen noticed. But he was fighting his own battles. The pressure on Stephen's empire had intensified. Expansion into new ports meant negotiations, threats, betrayals. But it was his health that was failing. At night he coughed more often. He held his chest when he thought no one was watching. Only Brenda noticed. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked one evening, helping him up the stairs. "I'm fine," he said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But tired didn't explain the locked study. The late-night calls to his lawyer, Elias Mangy. The way Stephen began giving Brenda long, searching looks, as if memorizing her face. One evening, just 3 weeks before his death, Stephen called Brenda into his study. The room smelled of leather and old paper. Files were stacked neatly, but his desk was bare. He closed the door himself. "Promise me something," he said, his voice low and steady. "Anything," Brenda whispered. "No matter what happens, don't lose yourself. And don't lose this." He placed a thin necklace in her palm. Simple. Almost unimpressive. A small metallic pendant hung from it, still warm from his skin. "It's just jewelry, Dad," Brenda said, confused. Stephen smiled faintly. No. It's protection. Brenda wanted to ask more, but he stood up, signaling the conversation was over. That was the last private moment they ever shared. 2 weeks later, Stephen Roddick was dead. The official statement said cardiac arrest. Painless. But Brenda would always remember the way he looked that morning. Paler than usual, distracted, as if weighed down by something invisible. The funeral was massive. Politicians gave speeches. Business leaders arrived in black convoys. The press documented every tear. Brenda stood beside Namsa, dressed in black, hands clasped, feeling like a guest at her own father's goodbye. Namsa cried in public. Loudly, perfectly. Kelvin wore dark sunglasses and whispered jokes during prayers. No one noticed Brenda shaking. And then, everything changed. After the burial, the house that once felt distant became hostile. Locks were changed. Staff were reassigned. Conversations stopped when Brenda entered rooms. At breakfast one morning, she found her seat gone. Sit somewhere else, Kelvin said casually. That chair's taken. Taken by who? Brenda asked. There were empty chairs everywhere. Namsa said nothing. Later that day, Brenda overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. She doesn't need access to the West Wing anymore, Namsa told the house manager. Remove her things. But madam, the man hesitated. Sir Stephen. Sir Stephen is dead, Namsa snapped. And I make the decisions now. That was when Brenda understood. Her father's death wasn't just a loss. It was a removal of protection. That evening, she knocked on Namsa's door, trying to keep her voice steady. I want to know where I stand. Namsa looked at her slowly, like she was assessing an object. You stand where I allow you to stand, she replied coldly. This family is moving forward. Don't become a problem. Brenda nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, and returned to her room, now half empty. For the first time in her life, Brenda felt like she was standing on the edge of something dark. And she had no idea how far she was about to fall. 3 days after the funeral, Namsa summoned everyone to the main living room. Staff members stood stiffly. Kelvin lounged on the sofa, legs stretched out like he already owned the place. And Brenda stood near the edge, quiet and invisible. Namsa stood at the center in black silk, her posture commanding. We need clarity, she began. Stephen is gone. This family must move forward with order. She turned to Elias Mangy, Stephen's longtime lawyer. Please explain the situation. Elias cleared his throat uncomfortably. There is a will. Mr. Roddick made provisions. Namsa raised her hand, cutting him off. There is one will. And it has already been reviewed. Brenda's heart jumped. Elias hesitated, his eyes flickering briefly toward Brenda, then back to Namsa. Yes, he said carefully. The document submitted names you as the primary executive of the estate. Kelvin smirked. And Brenda? Namsa asked, feigning indifference. Elias paused. His voice dropped. Brenda is not listed as a beneficiary in that document. The room seemed to tilt. Brenda felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Not listed. That's not possible, she whispered, finding her voice. I'm his daughter. Kelvin laughed. Biology doesn't buy companies, sweetheart. Lower your voice, Namsa said coldly. This is not a discussion. Brenda turned to Elias, desperation burning in her eyes. You knew my father. He wouldn't. Elias looked away. I'm sorry, he said quietly. This is what the document states. That night Brenda didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her half-empty room, replaying every memory, every conversation, every look. The necklace rested in her palm, cold and silent. None of it made sense. Stephen Roddick was many things. But careless. Never. Drop a comment. Type "by." If you've ever felt betrayed by family. The next morning, Brenda tried to enter her father's study. The door was locked. A guard stepped in front of her. Madame Namsa's orders. Something inside Brenda cracked. From that moment on, the hostility was no longer subtle. Her allowance was cut without explanation. Her access to family vehicles revoked. Staff who once greeted her warmly now avoided eye contact. Even meals were restricted. Her name quietly removed from the dining schedule. "You eat when I say you eat," Namsa told her flatly one evening. "You are not entitled here." Kelvin enjoyed it. He accidentally spilled drinks on Brenda's clothes. He made jokes in front of guests. "Some people forget their place when money's involved," he said loud enough for her to hear. Brenda endured it all in silence. Until the accusation. It happened on a quiet afternoon. Namsa stormed into the living room holding a small velvet box. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. Brenda looked at the box, confused. "I've never seen it before." Namsa opened it, revealing an expensive diamond bracelet. "This was in my room," Namsa said coldly. "Now it's gone." Kelvin leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Namsa's eyes locked onto Brenda. "Only one person here is desperate enough to steal." Brenda's breath caught. "I didn't take anything." "Search her room," Namsa ordered. "You can't." Brenda stepped back. Two guards were already moving past her. Minutes later, they emerged holding the velvet box. Brenda's knees buckled. "No," she whispered. "You planted that." Namsa slapped her. The sound echoed through the room. "How dare you accuse me?" Namsa hissed. "After everything this family has done for you." Kelvin stood up, clapping slowly. "That's embarrassing." Brenda tasted blood in her mouth. But she didn't cry. "Not yet." "Pack your things," Namsa said. "You leave tonight." "This is my home," Brenda said, her voice shaking. Namsa leaned in close. "Your father is dead. You have nothing." The guards didn't wait for Brenda to respond. She was given 20 minutes. 20 minutes to pack a life. She grabbed what little remained: clothes, an old notebook, and the necklace. Mama Ruth, the elderly housekeeper, appeared silently at the door, tears streaming down her face. "Take this," Mama Ruth whispered, pressing some cash into Brenda's hand. "And don't lose faith." Brenda hugged her tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of home one last time. Then she was escorted out. The gates closed behind her with a final, metallic clang. That night, Brenda slept on a bench at a bus terminal. The city lights of Nairobi blurred above her as exhaustion took over. Her stomach ached with hunger. Her heart ached with disbelief. By morning the news had spread. "Stephen Roddick's daughter cast out," the headlines whispered. Namsa gave carefully crafted interviews. "She chose to leave," Namsa said, dabbing her eyes. "We tried to help, but she became difficult." Kelvin posted photos online from the mansion, smiling beside champagne bottles. The world believed Namsa. No one questioned the story. No one. Except Brenda herself. Life outside the Roddick gates didn't ease Brenda into suffering. It dropped her straight into it. The first week blurred into a haze of hunger, exhaustion, and humiliation. Brenda moved between cheap hostels, overcrowded bus terminals, and the occasional kindness of strangers who offered directions but not shelter. Nairobi was loud, relentless, and completely indifferent to a young woman whose name once opened doors. Now her name meant nothing. On the fourth night she ran out of money. The hostel clerk didn't bother hiding his impatience. "No cash, no bed," he said flatly, already reaching for the next customer's key. Brenda stepped back onto the street, clutching her small bag. The city lights flickered above her like distant stars, beautiful, unreachable. She walked until her feet ached, until the city noise softened into murmurs. Eventually, she found a quiet corner near a closed shop and sat down, pulling her jacket tightly around herself. That was when reality finally hit her. She was alone. Not temporarily. Not dramatically. Truly alone. Her phone buzzed. For a moment, hope surged through her chest. Then she saw the message. Unknown number. You should have left quietly. Don't make this harder. Brenda stared at the screen, her hands shaking. She didn't need to ask who sent it. Namsa. Another message followed. If you try anything stupid, remember, you have nothing. Brenda locked the phone and buried her face in her knees. Her body trembled, but she refused to cry. Tears felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Drop a love. If you've ever felt completely alone. The next morning she went looking for work. She lined up outside restaurants, warehouses, small shops, anywhere with a handwritten "help needed" sign. Most managers barely glanced at her. You have experience? One asked. Yes, Brenda replied. Administration, inventory, accounts. The man laughed. I don't need a CEO. I need someone to scrub floors. I can do that, Brenda said quickly. He shook his head. Usoff. Next. By midday, the sun burned overhead. Brenda's stomach growled painfully. She sat on a curb watching people rush past. People with purpose, with destinations. That's when she noticed an elderly woman struggling with a cart full of vegetables. Without thinking, Brenda stood up and helped her lift it over the curb. Thank you, my child, the woman said, smiling warmly. What's your name? Brenda. The woman studied her face. Well, Brenda. Kind hands don't stay empty forever. The words stayed with her. That afternoon, she found work at a small roadside eatery on the outskirts of the city. The owner, a tired-looking woman with sharp eyes named Mama Joyce, looked Brenda up and down. You'll wash dishes, she said. Pay is daily. No excuses. Yes, ma'am, Brenda replied. The work was brutal. Grease-stained plates. Hot water that scalded her fingers. Customers who snapped their fingers instead of speaking. But when she was handed her first few crumpled notes at the end of the day, Brenda nearly cried. She bought bread and tea and ate slowly, savoring each bite like a victory. That night, she slept behind the eatery, curled up on a flattened cardboard box. It wasn't comfort, but it was survival. Days turned into weeks. Brenda learned which streets to avoid at night, which shop owners were kind, which ones shouted. She learned how to keep her head down, how to disappear. But what she didn't know was that back at the Roddick estate, Namsa was growing uneasy. Have you heard anything? Namsa asked sharply, pacing the living room. Kelvin shrugged. She's probably gone. Or begging somewhere. Namsa stopped pacing, her jaw tight. Don't be stupid. People like her don't disappear quietly. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. Find her, she said into the receiver. I want to know where she sleeps. Meanwhile, Brenda was being tested in ways she never imagined. One afternoon at the eatery, a supplier arrived shouting accusations about unpaid bills. Mama Joyce shouted back. Voices rose. Customers stared. Brenda stepped forward calmly. Let me see the invoices. Mama Joyce hesitated, then handed them over. Brenda scanned the documents quickly, her eyes sharp. You're charging twice for the same delivery, she said, pointing. Same date. Same quantity. The man froze. Mama Joyce's eyes widened. Is that true? The supplier muttered excuses and stormed off. Mama Joyce stared at Brenda in disbelief. You just saved me a month's earnings. Brenda nodded, suddenly shy. It was obvious. Mama Joyce studied her for a long moment. You weren't born for this life, she said quietly. Brenda shrugged. Life doesn't ask what we're born for. Mama Joyce grunted. True. That night, Brenda earned more than she ever had since being cast out. It wasn't much, but it was progress. She used part of the money to buy a small notebook. On the first page she wrote 2 words. Find the truth. She didn't know how yet, but she knew her father hadn't abandoned her. And somewhere, somehow, there had to be answers. Days later, as she counted cash at the eatery, a well-dressed man stepped inside. Observant. Out of place. He ordered tea and watched Brenda quietly. When she brought it over, he smiled. "You're efficient." "Thank you," Brenda replied carefully. "My name is David," he said. "I'm looking for someone with integrity." Brenda paused, her guard up. "You found the wrong place." David chuckled softly. "I don't think so." They spoke briefly, about work, about honesty, about doing the right thing even when no one is watching. As he left, David slipped a business card onto the counter. "If you ever want a better opportunity," he said, "call me." Brenda watched him go, her heart racing. Not with hope, with caution. Nothing good came easily anymore. That night, Brenda couldn't sleep. She sat in the cramped room she now shared with two other women, staring at the necklace in her palm. Her father's last gift. His last words echoed in her mind. "It's protection." She had tried everything. Twisting it, pulling it, looking for hidden compartments. Nothing. Frustrated, she let it fall against her chest. But then, something shifted in her memory. Her father's hands. The way he had pressed it into her palm that night. Not just placed it, pressed it. Brenda picked up the necklace again, her fingers trembling. This time, she pressed the pendant firmly while twisting. Her breath caught. The pendant shifted slightly, revealing a tiny engraved symbol on the inside. 3 intersecting lines forming a precise, unfamiliar shape. Brenda's hands shook. She didn't know what it meant. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her father had hidden something in plain sight. And the path to the truth had just opened. But what was this symbol? And why had her father gone to such lengths to hide it? The answers would change everything. Brenda barely slept that night. The symbol burned in her mind. At dawn, she went to a small internet cafe and spent hours searching. Company logos, old news articles about Stephen Roddick's early business days, archived photographs. Nothing matched. Frustration gnawed at her, but she refused to give up. She sketched the symbol carefully in her notebook. There was only one person left who might know. Mama Ruth. It took Brenda the entire day to track her down. When she finally found the modest house where Mama Ruth was staying, the old woman looked both relieved and afraid. "You shouldn't have come alone," Mama Ruth said, pulling her inside quickly. Brenda showed her the necklace, revealing the hidden symbol. Mama Ruth's breath caught. "So he gave it to you," she whispered. "You recognize it?" Brenda asked urgently. Mama Ruth nodded slowly. "Not the symbol itself, but the way he spoke about it. Your father trusted very few people. When he planned in layers. What does it open?" Brenda pressed. Mama Ruth hesitated. "I don't know. But I know this. Your father kept a private safety deposit box. Not under his name. Under a symbol." Brenda's heart pounded. "Where?" Mama Ruth shook her head. "I never knew. But Elias Mangy might." Brenda stiffened at the name. "The lawyer who said I wasn't in the will. The lawyer your father trusted more than anyone," Mama Ruth said firmly. "Stephen knew what might happen. If he left instructions with anyone, it would be Elias." Mama Ruth gripped Brenda's hands. "Your father didn't leave things the way Namsa says. I've seen things in that house that don't add up. And Stephen Roddick was not a careless man." Brenda looked down at the necklace instinctively. Mama Ruth's eyes narrowed. "That? He gave you that before he died?" "Yes," Brenda whispered. Mama Ruth nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "Then hold on to it with your life." Before Brenda could ask more, Mama Ruth stood. "I can't stay long. But trust me, this story isn't over." What Brenda didn't know was that across the city, Elias Mangy had been wrestling with his own conscience. For weeks, he had sat alone in his office, staring at a locked drawer he hadn't opened since Stephen's funeral. Inside that drawer was a problem Stephen had anticipated. Elias remembered the night Stephen had called him in, just 3 weeks before his death. "I need a contingency," Stephen had said, his voice low and serious. "If anything happens to me." And if Brenda is pushed aside? Elias had frowned. Why would that happen? Stephen had smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Because greed is predictable. He had handed Elias a sealed envelope, thick with documents. Do not open this unless Brenda is in danger, Stephen had said carefully. And only if she comes to you willingly. Elias had nodded, uneasy. Now the news headlines played in his mind on repeat. Roddick daughter disowned. Heiress disappears after family dispute. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Elias finally made a decision. He opened his briefcase and stared at the sealed envelope. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. David, he said when the call connected. We need to talk. It's about Stephen and his daughter. David Nlevu sat across from Elias in a quiet restaurant, listening intently. She was erased too quickly, Elias said in low tones. Stephen anticipated something like this. David leaned back. Are you saying the will we saw wasn't the real one? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he placed the sealed envelope on the table between them. I've had this since before Stephen died, he said carefully. He told me to open it only if Brenda was in danger. And she is, David said. Elias nodded. Then it's time. Before he could open it, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A young woman's voice spoke softly. Mr. Mangy. My name is Brenda Roddick. Elias froze. Where are you? He asked immediately. They met the next morning in a quiet office away from the city center. Brenda sat stiffly across from Elias, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her clothes were worn. Her face was tired. But her eyes were sharp. Elias studied her carefully. The exhaustion, the restraint, the quiet strength. You look like your father, he said softly. Brenda didn't smile. I was told my father left me nothing, she said, her voice steady. I know that's a lie. Elias closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. He never intended for you to be unprotected, he said. But he knew Namsa would try to take everything. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the envelope. This is the real beginning, he said, sliding it across the table. Stephen wrote this himself. Brenda's hands trembled as Elias opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in her father's familiar script. She began to read, tears blurring her vision. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And Brenda has been pushed aside. This is exactly what I feared. The will presented is incomplete. It was designed to draw out greed. The true distribution of my estate is secured elsewhere, accessible only through the pendant I gave my daughter. Brenda's breath hitched. Elias looked up. You have the necklace. Brenda nodded, pulling it out from beneath her shirt. Elias's eyes widened. Then you are exactly where Stephen wanted you to be. The letter continued. Brenda, if you are reading this, I need you to understand something. I did not build my empire for power. I built it so you would never have to beg anyone for dignity. Trust Elias. Trust David. And above all, trust yourself. You are stronger than you know. Prove them wrong. Tears streamed down Brenda's face as she finished reading. So what happens now? She asked, her voice breaking. Elias took a deep breath. Now we proceed carefully. Namsa cannot know yet. If she does, she'll destroy evidence. He pulled out additional documents. Your father created a complex trust structure 15 years ago. It holds controlling interest in all the major companies. The visible shares were always secondary. Bait. Brenda's mind reeled. So everything Namsa has been running was never truly hers, David finished, entering the room. She managed operations. But ownership stayed hidden. Elias slid another file toward Brenda. And this, recorded instructions from your father, notarized, dated before his final hospitalization. Brenda read slowly. If Namsa presents a will excluding Brenda, It is to be considered provisional only. The true beneficiary is my daughter, Brenda Roddick. Any interference constitutes fraud. Brenda closed her eyes, breathing deeply. This ends it, she said. Elias nodded. It begins the end. Within hours, Elias initiated a sequence of moves that had been planned years ago but never expected to be used. Phones were switched. Files were duplicated. Old contacts were awakened from long silence. Stephen Roddick's contingency was no longer theoretical. It was active. Brenda was taken to an old financial building tucked between newer developments. Discreet, quiet, operating on trust rather than publicity. This place predates your father's empire, Elias explained. And it operates on one principle. Symbols, not names. Inside, a woman with silver hair greeted them politely. Her eyes flicked to the necklace around Brenda's neck. Do you have the key? She asked. Brenda nodded and stepped forward. The woman led them to a private room. On the table sat a small steel case. No markings, no names. Only symbols, the woman said. Brenda's heart pounded as she removed the necklace. Her fingers found the pendant, twisted gently and pressed. The same faint click echoed in the silent room. The symbol on the pendant aligned perfectly with an indentation on the case. The lock opened. Brenda gasped. Inside were documents. Thick, organized, unmistakably official. Elias leaned forward, scanning quickly. His breath caught. Share certificates, he said quietly. Majority holdings. Brenda's legs felt weak. What does that mean? David answered. It means your father structured his empire so the control was never fully visible. These documents represent the real ownership. Elias added. And it belongs to you. There was more. A sealed flash drive lay beneath the papers. Elias inserted it into his laptop. Stephen Roddick's face appeared on the screen. Brenda froze, tears instantly filling her eyes. He looked older than she remembered. Tired. Calm. If you're seeing this, Stephen said softly, then my fears were justified. Namsa has shown her hand. And Brenda. You have been tested. Brenda pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to speak. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you directly. But I needed to know something. That you would remain who you are, even without my name, even without my money. The video paused briefly, then resumed. Everything I built belongs to you. Not because of blood, but because of character. Elias will guide you. David will support you. And when the time comes, you must decide how this story ends. I love you, Brenda. I always have. And I always will. The room was silent except for Brenda's quiet sobs. Elias handed her a tissue. His own eyes wet. He believed in you, Elias said gently. Even when you didn't believe in yourself. Across the city, Namsa was unraveling. Her calls went unanswered. Her informants were suddenly vague. She's gone quiet, Kelvin said from the couch. No, Namsa said flatly. That girl doesn't disappear without a reason. She walked to the study, Stephen's study, and opened a drawer she hadn't touched since his death. She stared at the empty space where something used to be. Her stomach dropped. He moved it, she whispered. Kelvin frowned. Moved what? Namsa turned slowly, fear finally surfacing in her eyes. The real plan. Namsa began moving pieces frantically. Old contacts were reactivated. Favors were called in. She ordered background checks on Elias, on David, on anyone who had ever stood close to Stephen Roddick. What she found unsettled her deeply. Elias's accounts had activity again. Subtle, legal, purposeful. David had taken an unexpected interest in Roddick's subsidiaries. And Brenda's name had vanished from the streets. No sightings. The voice on the phone reported nervously. It's like she disappeared. Namsa slammed the phone down. She didn't disappear. She's preparing. Kelvin watched her carefully. You're overreacting. Namsa turned on him, eyes blazing. Do you know what happens if Stephen left her anything real? Kelvin hesitated. You said he didn't. Namsa's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. I said what needed to be said. For the first time, doubt crept into Kelvin's confidence. That night, Namsa opened a folder marked Emergency Measures. Inside were contracts drafted in haste, signatures acquired under pressure, arrangements made to disappear problems before they grew teeth. Her last resort. Kelvin watched from the doorway. What are you doing? He asked. Namsa didn't look up. Cleaning. Kelvin stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. His face drained of color. That's illegal. Namsa closed the folder softly. So is stealing a life. But you didn't stop me then. Silence fell like a blade. You knew enough, Namsa said coldly. Kelvin recoiled. I'm not going down for this. Then leave, Namsa said. Kelvin hesitated, torn between fear and loyalty. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Namsa was alone. At Elias's office, the final pieces were coming together. Court filings were prepared. Injunctions requested. A forensic accountant finalized a report tracing asset diversion. Small at first, then accelerating after Stephen's death. Patterns emerged. Intent became clear. We're ready, David said. Brenda leaned forward. Then let her know. The room fell silent. Elias studied her carefully. You're ready. Brenda nodded, her voice steady. I won't hide anymore. That evening, a carefully worded legal notice was delivered to the Roddick estate. Nothing explosive. Just enough. Namsa read it once. Then again. By the third time, her hands were shaking too badly to hold the paper. They're questioning the will, she whispered. They've frozen the accounts. All of them. Her phone rang, board members, bankers, partners. She ignored them all. Namsa drove straight to the estate's private office, hoping to salvage something, anything. The access code failed. He tried again. Denied. Panic surged. Meanwhile, Brenda walked into a building she had never been allowed to enter before, the legal wing of her father's empire. No cameras followed her. No applause greeted her. Only quiet respect. She didn't sit at the head of the table. She stood. I'm not here to punish, Brenda said to the assembled advisors. I'm here to restore what was broken. They listened. Because for the first time, the power in the room wasn't borrowed. It was earned. Namsa arrived at Elias's office unannounced, her composure finally cracking. You planned this, she hissed, pointing at Brenda. You humiliated me. Brenda met her gaze calmly. You did that yourself. Namsa laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. You think papers make you powerful? No, Brenda replied quietly. Truth does. Namsa leaned closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You could have stayed quiet, taken a settlement, lived comfortably. Brenda shook her head. I lived without comfort. I lived without dignity. I won't trade justice for silence. For a moment, something flickered in Namsa's eyes. Regret, perhaps. Then it hardened. This isn't over, she said. Elias stepped forward, his voice firm. It is. The court has accepted the filings. There will be a hearing. Namsa left without another word. Outside, the city felt different to Brenda. Less hostile. More honest. She thought of the nights she'd slept hungry. The strangers who had helped her without knowing her name. She thought of her father's quiet wisdom. Trust yourself. Tomorrow would bring confrontation. But tonight, for the first time since the rain-soaked grave, Brenda slept without fear. The storm was no longer coming. It had arrived. Sometimes life doesn't break us all at once. Sometimes it erases us slowly. Our name, our place, our safety, until we are forced to meet ourselves without protection. Brenda's story reminds us of a painful truth. Being born into privilege does not guarantee dignity. And losing everything does not mean losing your worth. When her father died, she didn't just lose wealth. She lost shelter, identity, and the illusion that fairness is automatic. Yet what carried her through hunger, rejection, and humiliation was not money hidden in documents, but character built in silence. This story teaches us that real inheritance is not what is handed to you, but what is revealed when everything is taken away. Kindness shown when no one is watching. Integrity chosen when revenge feels easier. Strength found not in power, but in restraint. Namsa lost everything, not because Brenda sought revenge, but because truth has a way of demanding air. And Brenda gained everything not by fighting loudly, but by refusing to become bitter in a world that tried to harden her. If you've ever felt pushed aside, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from nothing, remember this. Your value does not decrease because someone failed to see it. Now we'd love to hear from you. What part of Brenda's journey touched you the most? Have you ever experienced a moment where losing everything taught you who you really were? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories that remind us of humanity, justice, and hope, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing these powerful voices to life. Thank you for watching.